Here. Oh, thank you.
All right, we are live. Peace and love, everyone. Welcome back to the Healing Cypher, and I'm your host, Queen Tamar. We have an exciting show planned for you. This a minute, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with the streaming platform, but we're so excited this evening to be with you. Tonight, we're exploring the concept of stories and how important they are to our culture. As Indigenous people, storytelling is a vital way to teach our traditions, our culture, our history, and just important life lessons to impart on each other. So, tonight we're exploring the significance of storytelling with our very special guest, beloved Greg Woods, the keeper of stories. Yay! Welcome, welcome.
Give thanks. Thank you for having me, Tamara. I feel honored that you asked
Give
me to
thanks,
come.
give thanks. All right, can you share a little? Oh, it's the honors all mine. Thank you. Can you share a little bit about yourself with the listening audience?
Okay, I am. My Christian name is Gregory E. Woods, and my name as an elder is in the traditions that I walk is Alwan Shante Inyawikasa, which means heart song stone man, and I have a spiritual responsibility that I've known since I was born, and so it's always moved in phases as I learn from the old people. So at this stage in life, being this close to my death, it's a responsibility to give the medicines and the stories together to those who are up and coming. And in particular, um, there's a central question. This, of all the places I've lived in the world, this is the most violent of them all. And so, how do you live with that kind of spirit? And one thing that is missing is our relationship with our ancestors. They're there, they watch, and they have a particular pain that they hold. And in that pain, there is a hope that the next generations, plural, will learn from them and then do better for those who are coming. But we don't live in a culture that does that. We're fixated on the present as if that's the whole of everything. And so, and then I'm a father and I have grandchildren. And much of what I learned, believed, came from being not only a son, but it expanded as a father, because fatherhood makes extraordinary demands on the father. And often fathers in America are shunted to the side as if they just, provide the seed and then they're out. But there are depths to it. And
Yes.
there's more, of course, but go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was a great introduction. So, let's get into our topic this evening. Why are stories important to our people? What is the significance of stories?
Stories are important. Let's look at the African side of us. Um, the utter terror of being captured, and then what happened on the Middle Passage. Languages hold a story, and one of the things about West African cultures there were that the people spoke two, three, four, sometimes more languages, and so the stories and the rituals were with them. So when I was young, I used to try to imagine what it's like to be buried in the hull of a ship with all the excrement and all that in there, and then the
Just
sound
the
of
energy.
people in various states. So what sustained the mind? The mind is fragile, but the mind can be strengthened. Songs
Mm-hmm.
and stories. And so inadvertently, they became, they were carrying this across. And when they made it across the Atlantic, they had to keep telling the stories. They had to find the people who spoke their language. Sometimes they recognize each other because of relationships, war, the clans that they belonged to, and the Europeans were
Mm-hmm.
very observant, and because they had been traveling there and learning from the Africans, and so one of the powers that had to be disassembled was the power of the extended family. And
Mm-hmm.
Africans that became African Americans were always in a state
Mm-hmm.
of resistance. And um, I perhaps I should mention there was a time in my life when I was a police officer during the crack wars. This was part of how I had to deal with the young and older people who were deep into the game, and
Okay.
they needed the stories. So many times you had to be physical and hurt people. But the teachings of my ancestors through my parents, my mother in particular, would remind me. She said, if you tear a man down, build him up, or you will
Mm-hmm.
create an enemy who will go to any length to get back at you. So you have to
Mm.
give them the story. You've got to look. You have to know how to look in the eye and listen to the story that's in their eye, and then I would repeat it back the story to them. And sometimes traditional stories would come to me that were applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And years later, when I was out of that business and doing other things, I, I um one time I was near in a rough part of DC, and I heard someone call me by my street name, and I froze.
Mm-hmm.
And I all kind of thoughts went through my mind, and I turned around and I saw a man who I had severely dealt with 3 times, and I'm thinking because he had some
Mm-hmm.
men with him. Okay, I'm gonna have to fight to get out of here alive. He said to me, he said, I remember everything. He said, but I came to ask you um, he repeated to me what I had told him who he was. He wanted more validation for it. And then he hugged me. That moved me deep in my soul to see, because this is an action. And so when you have a
Mm-hmm.
particular type of medicine that where you have the responsibility to take care of family and community to the point where you need to negotiate with your death, which is a tradition that comes from Native folks and it comes from the African. You have to, with this capacity, you make a relationship with your death. I'm talking about men now.
Mm-hmm.
Women's relationship with their death is with their womb. And the reason that one of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons why there's wisdom for the matrilineal societies here on Turtle Island is because of the dual way that babies receive knowledge from the divine, because it comes through the mother, it comes through the womb. And
Mm-hmm.
somehow, for particular reasons, I remember coming into my mother's room. I remember being there, and I remember the conversations. I remember what I did. I remember when I came out. So, being the firstborn, my mother's job was to learn the spirit of her firstborn child. Now,
Mm.
fast forward, as a father, this is what I planted in my own children. And so the generation under me is my children. And my oldest child was a girl. She, her second child, died in her arms right after birth. And I
Mm-hmm.
went to see her in the hospital.
Okay.
And she asked me, why? And she said, Daddy, I know that you lost children. what was it like? I said, I cannot answer that because I was the father. You carried the child. And I wanted her to listen to what the child said. And so what she did when the doctors gave the baby back, she breathed on him and said some words, and the baby came back to life. And from 10 to 5 p.m., she spoke her heart into the baby. And this is something that goes on all around the world. It's a mother's song that speaks to the heart of the baby. And then the baby passed at around 5 o'clock. That evening, I went home and I did ceremony. Almost as soon as I started, I saw the baby, and that baby spirit came back to me, and we had a moment of conversation back and forth. Conversation is very rapid there. And he assured me he gave me assurances, and then he went on to another world. So, which I saw. Now, one of the reasons why I share this is to give an insight into how our people dealt with these things, because there are logical things to deal with, and then there are things that are illogical. And so this back and forth intertwines, and this was part of what happened. This is a great deal of what was always at work during the centuries of slavery. Yeah, I should stop there.
That was a very powerful story, especially the testimony about the experience of the mother and the child, and that timeless space between birth and death, and he was here just for a short period of time, and then he decided to make his transition nevertheless.
That also speaks to the power of who we are as a people.
Yeah.
I hope that there are young people listening to it. I have not been able to, since 2018, to mingle in the city with young people, and I like dealing with the young ones who have a propensity to taking life, and their contradictions are they're unable to face. What they resent most is the fear that men have of them. What is in a man that is afraid of a child? You can't. I did not understand it until I had children tell me this. It created a rage, and they were like bulls, and they would just smash everything because the men were afraid of them. So I'm calling a lot of men. There are men in DC, and most of them are in some of the poorest areas. Those men down there in some of the poorest areas over the years, those men are solid. But a great many of them have been incarcerated. I don't know what that's like, but in my relationships with them, they've told me the warriorship that had to take place as they began to come back into society. So we're always dealing with the warrior, and I better stop there too, because these stories start coming back to me. I don't want to take up all that time with all those stories.
They do, yeah. Well, share with us, why is it that we should share and know these stories of our ancestors? Why is it that the stories of our ancestors are important to us?
Because it ties us. It takes away the feeling of being alone and isolated, because that feeling is an illusion. Why should we leave our children in an illusion? And what they're doing is real-time actions, but they're living in an illusion. And
that's deep.
This culture does not respect the transitions that occur in young people. And the moment that a child moves into adulthood, something happens with their energy. You can't change it. You can't do
Yes.
surgery. This is energy. And I cannot remember the words, but I'll describe the meaning of the words. And what happens is, for example, boy's energy, I think, move in this direction, right to left, and it's a swirling thing.
Yes.
And that energy, unchecked by their fathers or men who know, sin spirals them off into dark places. But when you do catch it, that's when the conversation between a man and a boy becomes very intimate and very deep, and the clarity comes, and then power comes into play. So clarity, power, old age, and fear. Though envision that as a circle teaching. So in the circle, you can place any one of those things in any of the quadrants, north, south, east, or west. But they play with each other. So one of the questions to ask as a father is, how does clarity play with old age, while this boy is his energy is shifted and he's moving into adulthood? One of the things that the old man can tell the boy is that adolescence is not real. There is no time in society where there was adolescence. You transition from one to another. Adolescence
Right.
is a vacant spot
Absolutely.
where you have to kill the illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of African American parents have found a way in the past 20 years that I've known, and was that they are direct their children to become entrepreneurs. And something
Yes.
happens. Everyone I've seen on television or I've met, they seem to almost instantly tie it in to the relationship with the creator, almost instantly. And they start flowing with those two things. They don't get into art quarrels about if God is real or not. They don't, because they're in their purpose. They're created a business. They're establishing it, and then they're crossing racial and ethnic lines because they have a product that somebody needs who doesn't think or look like them. And then they just start expanding. And I often tell young people, even when they're teenagers, I ask them, "Do you have a passport?" They're like, many of us, to my surprise, how many Black Americans have passports. And recently, several of them have told me that they never crossed their mind to use it and to go across the ocean. I went, okay, that's interesting, but you need to go across the ocean.
Yeah.
And I said, you have to understand that everything is negotiable. It's not as expensive as you think.
Yeah.
And when you get over there, anywhere you go, don't go for those big 5-star hotels. Find a good hotel that's recommended by the local tourist agency that's safe for you. And then you just start mingling. You build relationship, work in small groups. Can you learn any other language? You don't need to go here and master language. You need to go there, because most around the world, it's English, French, and now Chinese.
Yes.
And so you just become a child. You become a child and you go and you start attracting like spirits. But then there's a side of you that's looking for the thief, le voyeur. And so you're looking for the thieves, the bad folk, but that's not your focus, because you're coming from the United States. All those predators and bad people, you come here. And if they go to Africa, I tell them, I said, when you set foot on that ground, something's going to happen to you. And they're like, what? I said, I ain't telling you. I'm not going to tell them. And when they come, those who've come back and found me, told me, before they even speak, I can see what the difference is. So this is my challenge to your listeners.
Yes.
Go to Africa.
Okay.
Set foot on the land. And you can bring stuff back that you buy, because you need to put money into the economy. People are looking for you for that. But talk. Go to the Medinas, the big public marketplace. Learn how to bargain, negotiate. It's a game. You get in there and you start bargaining and negotiating. But in negotiation, in the context of tradition, you're also building relationships. You go back to those people, you talk to them, and you've got to put things out of your mind that we take for granted here. Not everybody eats like we do. Not everybody has the abundance of food that we have. And it's a shock when you realize you go into a grocery store and there's not that much food in there. And there might be a cashier in there and he's alone. And so there's a lot to our responsibility as citizens here, but there's a lot of responsibility to our ancestors. It's a responsibility to our children who are not here and the ones who are here. I said too much. No, I didn't.
A bunch of different topics, but what happens to a group of people who don't know or share their ancestors' stories? You mentioned a little bit about the troubled young men you used to work with, but what happens to a people who don't pass on those ancestral and family stories, which is probably the state we're in now, I would think.
They become who controls them. They become who controls them. I've had I remember a few times when people who were like what you just described lashed out because they heard just a bit of who they might be. And so they would cling to what the other stuff. And they're frightening people. I don't know. I've never really figured out what to do with them other than what happened in the moment. But collectively, I don't really know what to do with them. I'm interested to know what someone else would do with that dynamic. But it's a sad one. But it's still the same. You're prey. Someone's going to prey on that.
You're right.
Someone's going to prey on that. And there are some Christian denominations where pastors will see it and take advantage of it. But then that particular paradigm you described is not respected by West Africans who are Christians. They may say one thing, but they don't respect that. And Africans from the continent who come here come with many things that would be beneficial to us, but they're not going to share it.
Okay.
And to answer one of the questions that comes from that short presentation is how do you listen to learn how to hear the stories that they're not telling? And one of the things I learned stateside is to listen to their children, because a lot of these African children that come over here to live, trying to fit in, which is what you do when you're very young, they gravitate to the Black Americans, and they'll start getting into the hip hop culture, for example, without understanding the pillars of hip hop. They're not going to the depth of it, because this always takes us back to our ancestors. And it's so I only dealt with African kids out of Ghana and Nigeria over the years, and they're not going to make it thinking that the path as a Black American who fits in as a teenager is to lead to jail. And but the stories, I'm trying to think of stories that I've used, it'll come to me later. There's an important story that I got to find before this hour is over.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the next question. Now, I've known you for a while and I've seen you tell stories. You've told stories to me and my family. But one of the things that you often talk about is creation stories. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, like how important it is to pass along a people's creation stories or to know their creation stories.
Oh boy.
Diving deep tonight. We got some people in the chat too. They're making little comments. I've been responding.
Okay.
I'm sure we're gonna have some questions this evening. Blessings to all of y'all too who joined us this evening. Creation stories.
Coyote, I mean not Coyote, creator
Mm-hmm.
took a nap one day and he dreamed
Mm-hmm.
that he dreamed the earth. And
Mm-hmm.
he started in his dream, he created those who live above the earth and those below, those who fly, the mountains. And he asked Coyote to, when he awoke, he asked Coyote to make this happen physically. And
Mm-hmm.
Coyote had the power to do it, and he did it. But then he got to thinking after he followed the plan of the creator for the world, the mischief came out of him, and he decided to mess with the two-leggeds. So
Mm-hmm.
he created mosquitoes. He created ants. I mean, not ants. Those little other buzzing things that annoy you. And
Mm-hmm.
these these stories, like Coyote was in the bushes, and
Mm-hmm.
he heard this sound, and he looked out of the bushes, and there was a beautiful woman there, and she was just crying. Heart was broken um, because she'd been rejected by a man who said he was going to marry her.
Okay.
And the rejection was profound because it wasn't him rejecting her. He just suddenly died. She couldn't understand any of this. So her grief has her mind going all kind of places. So Coyote listens to it and he sees how beautiful she is. So he taps himself and turns himself into a man, and he
Okay.
comes out there. He starts to console her and he listens to her, and she tells all of her heart, and he became who she needed to be. And then
Okay.
they laid down,
Mm-hmm.
they had relationships, and he made promises to her. Then afterwards, he got up and he left. She said, well, wait a minute, you made promises. And he looked at her like so I'm a coyote, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
trickster. And he walked away with what was so precious. And stories like that, I could tell that story better, but uh, but stories like that would govern behavior.
Mm.
How do you
Okay.
discipline yourself?
Mm-hmm.
That story will unfold in a girl's life as she puts her tender feet on the ground and she's moving, and then men with that who have the same lines that Coyote used to get the
Mm-hmm.
girl in the story, they start recognizing it, and they'll look inside and look at him and say, "You're a coyote," and he was like, "What do you mean, coyote?" Most people have never seen one. And
Mm-hmm.
so a girl can play tricks like the coyote because she can take on the coyote's spirit because now that story has become part of her. She's seen how her mother uses coyote energy. She's seen how an aunt
Mm-hmm.
uses coyote, or she hasn't, and she says, "I need to survive whatever I'm in." So
Mm-hmm.
you take those stories and you make them you. And so I
Mm-hmm.
used to play with them. I would
Mm-hmm.
go from one character to the other.
Yeah.
And in high school, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to know what was it like to be the bad guy. And so I forget the story I used when I was a junior in high school, but I became a bad guy and I shook down uh, a white boy who was just so timid. But when I got his lunch money, I walked away and started snickering like the coyote.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately I felt so bad. The guilt about killed me. I went
Right.
back to the kid, gave his stuff back, apologized, and then I explained things to him in such a way that we became friends that day. And then afterwards, the little trickster, the coyote, rose up again. And I
Mm-hmm.
told him my coyote story. And what I was going to do with him and another guy, we were going to sneak through the woods, all the way in the woods near the school, and go to the
Mm-hmm.
camps where our classmates would get high. And I showed them how to do this thing without making a sound. And as soon as those potheads and whatnot left, and assheads left, we went in there and destroyed their camp. And then we removed all sign of our presence, and we slinked off like Cody. And then went back to the school. And then I knew that those people were going to come to me with their complaints and how much they lost and everything. But here I am as Coyote, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
snickering behind my back because I created that mess. So the different
Mm-hmm.
stories, consciously and unconsciously, this is so much a part of our ancestral line that
Yes.
I think if many of us look at it, we see that we've incorporated stories in us. And so if you don't know what the stories are, and your old people don't know, go to the library, start
Mm-hmm.
reading, and talk to the librarians,
Mm-hmm.
and tell them, "I'm looking for this. I remember this story," and then you can find it, um, or you can go online if you know how to do that. But these stories are powerful, and they are
Yeah.
designed to follow us.
I like that
And
the stories are designed to
they're
follow us.
designed to follow us.
That reminds me of that movie. Came out several years ago, and I saw it again recently. It's called Dream Keepers, about the young Lakota boy who had to take his grandfather to the All Nations powwow from the Dakotas down to New Mexico, and they rode in the grandfather's truck. And he
Yeah.
didn't want to take him at first, but he did it to get himself out of trouble. And the whole journey, the grandfather and he are bonding, and he's sharing all these stories with him as they create their own. And as they were traveling, the son began to see people who embodied each of the characters in all of those stories. There was a
Oh yeah,
coyote in
yeah.
the story too. It's a really powerful movie, family. If
I
y'all
remember
have
that.
seen Dream Keepers, watch it, especially if you have children. Please show it to them before they start going through that teenage stuff. But
Yeah.
it's very important. I think we all can kind of see ourselves as that young brother in the movie at some point in our lives. We were somebody that needed guidance or direction. And so the grandfather just constantly was talking to him and teaching him. And like you said, those stories follow you. And it was something in each of them that helped him throughout his life. That's going to help him throughout his life and help him
Yeah.
at his present.
I
Yeah.
remember that movie.
Yeah, it was powerful.
I remember that movie.
Mm-hmm.
That fact, probably shouldn't admit this on air, but that movie moved me to tears. I sat each
I
time I
think
saw, I
it
would
moved
sit.
everybody to tears,
That
especially
thing.
I don't
Oh
want
my
to I don't
goodness.
want to say what happened in it,
No,
spoil it, but
but
yeah, I think it has tear jerking moments for everybody, I think. Yeah.
I wonder what that would have been like for young people to watch that movie.
Well, I made my children look at it with me years ago when the first time I saw it. So it's
Oh,
I think like I said, I think everybody is one of those kind of movies that warm your heart, something that all ages could
mm-hmm.
benefit from watching, you know. So yeah, definitely. But and you do a lot of storytelling because I've known you for a while. And how do you use it to help people in the healing work and stuff that you do?
Oh,
You share,
healing work.
yeah, the stuff that you do, especially with the youth that you work with. How do you use the storytelling to benefit them or to help them?
Sweat Lodge.
Mm.
When I was years ago, when uh, I was given permission to lead sweat lodges, um, one up in the mountains in Virginia, where we would do the ceremonies, the uh, the children. Oh man, I'm saying I'm thinking about the older children. It's in the late teens and the early 20s. Um, in the lodge, the way that I was doing the lodge, the I had to be prepared for all the dark that came out of them.
Mm. In the sweat lodge.
Yeah, the dark would come out, and a lot of times you could see it with your eyes, have it come out,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was too much for those because it was unexpected for those who were in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the gate, and so there's a skill that's involved in having people to stay seated or lying on the ground and not leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a magnification of the process that I had to learn from my upbringing of what to do with the shadows
Mm.
that are in you, and the responsibility of one who um, leads the lodge. You have to have done these things yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and so in that you've done the 4 rounds, and my how I use it is it doesn't stop once the rounds are over, because we come out and then uh, different things happen once they go outside and they go into the circle of where the fire is,
Mm.
and they have to sit. I don't tell them what's going to happen because I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just waiting for something to happen. Sometimes you're waiting and you find that something in the forest comes out.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes animals, physical animals, will just come out of the forest and they will make circles around the lodge.
Yes.
And from wherever you drew the circle with your
Mm-hmm.
intention, and say who can and cannot come, the animals and the birds respect it and will not come across that circle.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have the one who is pouring his or her relationship um, with the animal world, the insects, the birds. Um, it is very important. It's not something that you preach about. It's just that these are your allies. Some people who are in dire straits and they're in the lodge, um, they will start seeing some of this, and they will when I'll do follow up, I'll see them months later, and I'll hear what they have gone through in that what was in the lodge follows them,
Mm.
and some of them. I'm thinking about some that went in there. I didn't know that they had trouble with alcoholism and
Mm-hmm.
drugs,
Mm-hmm.
and but the stories stayed with them. But it wasn't only the stories; it was what was in that lodge,
Mm-hmm.
because that walks with you, that walks with you, and I keep emphasizing it because uh, it's something to uh, be experienced, but it's also a challenge to find someone that you trust that you can do a large ceremony with.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I've only known of one time where someone was dishonest and dark in their heart, but they could create light and have people come to their lodges. And so
Mm.
his arrogance got the best of him, where he did something that was just wrong. But the vulnerable people who went in there, they didn't know any better. And then literally all hell broke loose, and it impacted people bad. And I
Mm.
remember an elder had to come in and fix things, much in the same manner when Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple.
Yes.
It was like that. You got to
Mm-hmm.
throw the money changers out of the people, and you have to have the authority for that. But beneath authority, as I've said before, what's in your heart? You love these people. You care for them. You might not know them, but you love them and you care for them, and you see that they've come to someone to give them aid, to give them help. So the directive is our heart. That's our directive, and
Mm.
that's the way we have been all the time we've been here.
Mm-hmm.
And we have also, as I said before, we also have to be prepared and able to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And but again, all boils down to the way that we love.
Mm.
It always boils down to the way that we love.
Okay.
I can you can give them this, you can give them this,
Mm-hmm.
but when you give them this,
Mm-hmm.
punch them in the ribs. But you can kiss them on the cheek.
Mm.
These things are all interrelated. They're all interrelated. You can't separate them because in a native mind, nothing was separated.
Mm-hmm.
Remember uh,
Mm-hmm.
that phrase that came from Sitting Bull that he's quoted from?
Which one?
Today's a good day to die.
Yes.
All the things of my life are here. He said this. He was in a battle with the crow, I think, and
Mm.
losing. And he said those words.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Today is a good day to die, for all the things of my life are here." What he meant was, from his worldview, was that his past, his present, and his future were all in this one moment.
Mm.
Anytime he died, this is completion. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't cut off. He was
I,
born in the complete whole.
mm. I never knew that he was the one who coined that phrase. I just always repeated it, but I didn't know it came from him.
Mm-hmm. And
Mm.
mostly you heard the first part, I imagine, because I hear it at football games.
Yeah, today's a good day. That's all you ever hear.
That's all you ever hear. But he said,
Right.
"Today is a good day to die, for all the things of my life are here."
Mm.
And it just, for us, when you hear the whole and understand, you know what the world looks like to us. It's a
Mm-hmm.
completely different shift.
Mm-hmm.
You're in battle, and that's what comes out of you, and you're in battle for your life.
Just fearless. Yeah.
And that's what I employed when I was a police officer back those decades ago. In the midst of all that stuff, I
Mm-hmm.
would that's what these men were getting. They were like, "Oh my God, all of that, and this is what you gave me." That's something to puzzle. And they had to take that back to the paradigms that shaped them, and their paradigm shifted because of that. They took it in. I don't know which one of them could dissect that. That didn't matter. What mattered was that it became a part of them.
Mm.
It's got to become a part of them. And then the intellect that understands it, if it comes later, it comes later.
Yes.
But we're going to speak what we know. We can't help it.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Let me tell you back. We can't help it, but then we can because we're responsible.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you just can't be run off of the mouth.
Yes.
There's a lot that you have to hold.
Mm.
Because there's things that you and I know
Mm-hmm.
that if you shared it, for example, to the wrong person, it might crush them.
Yes.
It'll crush them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Storytelling is a gift. It's not to be taken lightly. It's definitely a gift.
mm-mm.
You include a lot in your stories, but what do you suggest to the listening audience when it comes to putting the sacred back into our stories?
Put it back into your life.
Mm-hmm.
Put the sacred back in your life.
Okay.
That's all. And I would write stuff down. Like, see this book?
Mm-hmm. That's a
I
journal.
wrote that. I wouldn't call it a journal. I just write these books because I could have them published. I'm finding a publisher now. I mean, finding an editor now.
Mm-hmm.
But I go to the store and I would buy these books, and I've learned how to write. Um, and I put them into these notebooks, and I create the stories. And at different times, when I've been in different ceremonial situations, I'll go into my bag and I will pull out the notebook and give it to a young man. And he said, "What?" I said, "Read that."
Mm-hmm.
And there's a language. Um, there's a language that I write in that resonates with them, and it goes back to what we said before. It's the old giving to the young what they need to
Mm-hmm.
grow into their old age. And then you got the uh, the medicine wheels, the circles. So I created books of them, and
Oh, the medicine wheel.
yeah, and these I don't do it like a collector. I will over my lifetime, these I have used, and I've
Mm-hmm.
used them in all the ways that they could be used that were applicable to my growth or breaking me down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was never my intention when I was a young man to share medicine wheels, medicine stories, and stuff. It was never my intention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I never thought about it until I can't remember. I wish I could remember his name, but as you know, DC uh, has what is back then there was like 7 or 11 different houses of worship from different African traditions. Remember, and so
Okay.
those I spent time in each one of those houses,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the houses, one of the high priests, one of the African high priests, was giving some information about the medicine wheels to people, but he had not used them. He had just been introduced to them, and I just shared a little bit, and he realized that I had been incorporating this into my life, and he asked me to teach it, and I couldn't do it because
Mm.
I didn't have that wasn't I never was going plan to do it, but it made me think, and so many years went past, and that stayed in the back of my mind, and then I got a release to you
Mm-hmm.
to find the ways to share them, and one of the things was just sit down and draw draw them out,
Mm-hmm.
and so because of many of us were raised in the Christian church, a question to ask, or that for me to ask, was, okay, where is the roots of Christianity? Of course, you're going back to you're going back to Judaism. Then you go back further. What was before? So
Mm-hmm.
those questions kept leading me to more and more and more. And I never been a fast walker. I would just go through it, just go
Mm-hmm.
through particulars, and I would find the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And but I also know that that's not part of the upbringing of millions of people, and
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not part of it. And so you, I learned from talking to some of the ministers that I know. Uh, I've listened to. I go to their churches, help where I could, but I was in private. I was critical of of their messages, and I would ask when I found out what they were learning in seminary. Um, I said, "Wait a minute, why why is that subject not given to your congregation?" And this one here, this is vital because when you've preached this over the years, you left this out, and they keep coming back, but they're not getting the holes filled in. The
Yes.
answer I got staggered me. Their concern was if we do this, most of our congregation will leave.
Mm.
I was like, what? He said, that's why we don't do it. I had
Mm.
2 ministers tell me that. One of those ministers did it. He'd been wrestling with this for a long time. And then one day he went up and he began to teach at the level that was not focused on keeping members and bringing tithes in. And I forget, it was a very short period of time. His church left him except for the core members. Those were the ones who paid the tithes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how many were men? He said, there were no men.
Yes.
There were no, he said it was women. The women are the pillars.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And these are things to wrestle with. Even though the backdrop, we know that church membership is dropping in these days for good and understandable reasons.
Mm-hmm.
My father, he's a civil rights leader. He was a chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality in Washington, D.C. in the late 60s. And when I got older, I invited Daddy to one of the circles of young men, and they listened to Daddy's story. And one of the young men asked Daddy, what should have been done? What should Black folks have done after the civil rights movement? What was the next step? And Daddy quickly, without hesitation, said, after the civil rights movement, he said Black people needed to go back to the church and dig and go to the core of the church, because therein lies what is wrong in Black Americans. He said, if they don't do that, they are only going to repeat themselves over and over again. They need to go back to that.
Okay.
Who is that? That's what African bird? That's Sankofa.
The Sankofa bird. Okay.
That's the Sankofa. That's the requirement of Sankofa. Everything keeps going back to the depth of the African spiritual teachings. And the African spiritual teachings, as you know, are intertwined here because of the constant travel over the centuries of Africans by boat going over to what's now the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And these are important things to discover, to give to our children. They're responsible for using it. We're responsible for giving it to them.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's take a moment and see if we have any. Are there any questions in the chat this evening? We have a few people listening. Dia, Monica Peak, Monster Shannon. Are there any questions from the listening audience? Let's see. And so far, no. There's a few people joining and chiming in. Okay. So without the questions, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to always end the show with the meditative thought of the week. Do you have any closing statements you want to share with us, Brother Greg?
No closing statement except to keep yourself in a state of learning. And thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure is all out. Yeah. All right. Would you like to share your how can people reach out to you? I know you have a Facebook page. If they want, do you do?
I'm one of the few people that I don't use Facebook anymore. I had to go into that lodge of introspection, and I keep it because eventually I'm going to go back because I like writing. But for now, you can reach me through the contact information that's on there, or
what's the contact?
That'd be the best way. Or if somebody that you know that you would like to speak to me, that you call me. I'll speak to you.
All right. We have one comment. Dia says, "Great video. Please do a part 2." Thank you, love, for watching and listening. We'll have him on the show again another time. Talk about either this greater detail or another topic.
Oh, okay.
That'd be great. If you
That'd be
okay.
good.
All right, so we're gonna end with the meditate. Every week I do the meditative thought of the week, and tonight's thought is what becomes of a people without stories. And I
Mm,
think people will perish without stories. Stories to guide them through the storms of life. Stories provide wisdom, esoteric knowledge, guidance, and humor to life's experiences. They can help you heal as well as find your purpose in life. The wisdom of our ancestors can be shared with us through stories as we create our own stories that will be shared with others in the future. Because remember, we're going to be someone's ancestor someday. Remember, family, your light in the darkness. Please join us each week next Monday for the Healing Cypher show, same time, 7 p.m. And don't forget, Wednesdays on my YouTube channel, we also do Ask the Herbalist Hour, where we talk about different health and healing topics. So until next time, may you be surrounded and filled with love, peace, abundance, good health, and happiness. Thank you, Brother Greg, for joining us, and thank you, everyone, for listening. May you all be at peace and blessed.
mm. Oh.
Aho, Ashe.